Am I on? Good morning. I hope this is working. I'm so new at all of this, so I'm not sure if this is working, but I tried to stream this on my private Facebook group, which is the Thriving Singles Community. But for some reason, Zoom is showing that I don't have permission to post on that group. So I don't know why. I'm the owner of the group, but anyway, so I'll just have to share it later. I apologize for anyone who went there and didn't find me. I am Sherry Braithwaite, and I am the owner of Dating Olympics. Today is our first day of the 5-day challenge of rediscovering yourself after a divorce. And it's all about self-image. I have learned over the years many things about just through my healing process, the struggling and then failing marriage, and well, throughout my whole life, actually, come to think of it, I've had a lot of challenges with self-image. And I have learned recently that all of these problems that I've had, all of the I guess, debilitating thinking and the depression or anxiety, the moments when I felt worthless or I felt like not myself personally, but that I just had no hope in life, that my circumstances were not in my control. When I felt like that, I have learned that in all of these cases, I just needed to have a more healthy self-image. I needed to see myself, to learn to see myself the way that God sees me. And I'm going to meet today with a therapist. His name is Max Park. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and he specializes in attachment and addiction and trauma. And he has, I used to work for him. I was the office manager where he worked. And I just loved the things that he taught. Each week he would get together, we would get together as all the therapists and we would get together and have trainings. And he just had some amazing things to teach. And all the therapists really appreciated his insights and experiences, and helped with all the clients that came to our office with some of these concepts that we will talk about today. So I would encourage you, if you have never considered meeting with a therapist, I would strongly recommend it. Whether it just starts with a friend or finding them online or hanging out with us on our private Facebook groups or whatever it might be, to learn from these therapists who have been to school for many, many years. They are not all the same. They're not all created equally, but you will find a therapist that speaks to you and that can help you in your healing journey, your healing process. So Max is just going to hop on here, I assume. I hope it works. And then we'll just start talking to him when he jumps on. I wanted to just get on for a couple minutes before he gets on, just to say hey and what's going on. I have in some of my courses, I went to workshops and seminars. I participated in quite a bit of those closer to the end of my marriage, when I was doing everything I could to help it, to save it, my marriage. And I was learning from an organization of people, of therapists and mentors who I went to therapists at the time, and they were wonderful, and I learned a lot of things. But when I went to Landmark Education is who I went with, who I learned from, and just in a weekend's worth of time, my life was changed. Of all these months of trying to figure these things out with therapists, I went and learned from just a couple of concepts that it took for me to break through some of these the debilitating concepts and such that I had. I learned from that our thoughts are so powerful. Everything begins with our thoughts. They are what drive our feelings, and our emotions also lead to our behaviors, of course, and our behaviors bring about actions, and our actions bring habits, But it all starts with our thoughts. And so today, Max is going to talk to us a little bit about the concepts that we have in our lives, the way that we see ourselves, and the way that we see how we fit into this world around us, how we see others, and how we see how we fit. All of that affects our self-image. It all affects our life, really. But learning about these things in relation to our own selves, and how these concepts are so powerful for us. So a couple of things that I learned that took me a while to grasp. So I can just dump it on you. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I did learn in all of these moments when I was so depressed and struggling, I was in a place of blaming my husband at the time for just about every problem in our marriage. And I learned to get outside of blaming and look at myself and look at where I am causing the disconnect, because it always takes two. And I did learn that. And it took a while. After a couple of years, I could see that this is true. If I am at peace and if I have a healthy self in image, then it doesn't matter what anyone else does or says. Like things just kind of fall out of place when you have a healthy self-image. You can set personal boundaries, and if you have a healthy view of yourself, then it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks and what they say or do. It just doesn't affect you. So there's not depression, there's not anxiety, there's not the effects that come from the trauma. So that's one thing for sure, is to look at yourself and see, what can I do? Maybe not blame yourself what I have done. You can repent and you can make changes. But what can I do today to make this better? The circumstance better, my situation better? How can I bring peace in for myself? And then another thing is that we seek validation a lot of time. That's part of it as well. We seek for other people. We will be validated. We will be right in most cases. We will find someone who will agree with us that we have the right to hurt. In both cases, both spouses, both people have the right to hurt. They're in pain, and it's because of their situations and how they're seeing it and how they're being treated. But validation is not where the power is. There is comfort in feeling validated. And I will validate everyone. I know how it feels. You have the right to hurt. However, one step into healing would be for you to step outside of validation and just ask yourself, okay, now what can I do? Yes, it hurt. It sucks, but I'm not in this place anymore where I have to blame anyone or any situation. Instead of validating where I feel, I'm going to say, okay, now what can I do about this? So let's see what time it is. It's 6:57. So he was going to jump on at 7. Just wanted to see how much time I had left to share some of these things. I have these concepts that I gained took a lot of time, and it was a tough pill to swallow. So dumping that in 5 minutes, one paragraph is like I said at the very beginning, it might not be so helpful, but if you will consider these things, I promise you that is where you'll find your healing, is when you can look inside yourself and to ask, what can I do to make my life, my situation better? And to stop blaming, to take responsibility and stop blaming others. So what I will talk with Max about right now is the context that we have, the way that we see others and see ourselves, and the way we interpret what other people are saying and doing, and on, all of our thoughts that are connected with our emotions that fit with circumstances and whatnot. It all begins at a very young age. And Max, and I know many other professionals, I've been actually looking into this more. I don't quite understand how this works, but he believes that many of our physiological and emotional channeling or messaging, or some parts in our brain, the way that our brain and our bodies pick up things. Oh, here comes Max. I just want to finish this one thought before he jumps on. Is that we can be we are affected, our whole lives are affected by these contexts that we adopt. This is Max Park. He's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and other credentials that he's very modest to explain here. I would love for you to tell if you want to tell more about your experiences and your credentialing. He's a smart man, and a lot of other therapists turn to him for the information that he teaches. Tell us, first of all, just about what you want us to know about you or yourself. Like, what brought you to being a therapist is always an interesting question.
Oh, I was already on. I guess anyway, you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah. It's something I've always wanted to do, to be involved in therapy. So my background really is about going through my own difficulties and trials, and being bullied at a very young age, and finding that I found some solace in being able to help others who are also being bullied at the time. And even though I was suicidal, it seemed to shift everything for me, so that I enjoyed helping others. And I thought, this is something I want to do. Yeah. And so that's kind of the background, the backstory. And I've enjoyed it and love doing it. And that brings us up to date. I'm in private practice, as well as working for Solace part-time as well. So that's the background.
Yeah, and Max he specializes in attachment, reactive attachment disorder, and works with hundreds of families to help educate about attachment, and most especially the children who have experienced trauma, right, at a young age, maybe adopted or what it might be, challenges in parenting and child relationships. Max is your man to talk to. He has actually helped me and my daughter. She was adopted, and believe me, there are some challenges with their context, as I talked a little bit about earlier. And that's what I want to have you talk about, is our context that we have, whatever our situation is. Everyone, I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, I believe that everyone at some point when they're tiny or young, we have a situation that happens where we tell ourselves, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, or whatever it might be. And that's what we hold on to. I'm not loved. That's a common for adopted children. I'm not loved, I'm not wanted. And those concepts, just they grow up with us. We grow up with them. So can you talk a little bit about context and the effects that it has on us, on our lives, and how that affects self-image?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's always remarkable how we, when we're very, very young, and as Sherry mentioned, even in utero, we create some our negative core beliefs about ourselves just because of what someone says or someone does. We don't really have a concept of our real value and our worth, and therefore we pick up on those things from other people and our surroundings and environment, what's happening around us, and then we make decisions, really, really vital and important, but often negative decisions about ourselves because of the way we are treated or looked at, or what we perceived by others as what's happening. So we have this very narrow perspective on what's happening, and then we make decisions, these important decisions about ourselves, like Sherry mentioned, that we are unloved, or that we're not good enough, or that we're ugly, or that we are not favored, or that we are trash. Millions of things that you think of, and I call these the negative core beliefs that we take on, and then we actually use that throughout our life, and we start validating that. We start looking at our situations, even up to the present, as adults. We look for validation of those negative core beliefs. So the way somebody if we get fired from a job, or if we get turned down from a date, or we get whatever the situation might be, we use that to validate what we already believed about ourselves that was negative.
Something happens and then we say, see, I told you it's not good enough. Max actually has a book, a workbook that he's providing, and we'll provide this also in our Dating Olympics course for anyone to purchase. But it is full of information, and my favorite of the sections where you give some advice, some suggestions. What are some things we can do to help reprogram these thoughts that we have about ourselves?
Like you said, this is not much different. Trauma is very, very similar to what we were talking about earlier about those negative core beliefs that we create, only it's going to be much more severe, right? And we're so impressionable at a very young age, and where we take on those negative core beliefs. And so trauma does the same thing. It just more severe. But trauma is different for everybody, right? And some things or some things that have happened to us would be more traumatic to some than others. But anyway, so getting back to your question of what are some things that you can do. So that's why I put that book together, or workbook, so that people could actually work through that themselves and figure out those negative core beliefs and shift them for them. So I guess one of the things that I love, and since we're talking about that, I'll use that example of getting perspectives from other people helps us shift those negative core beliefs. So when we think about our best friend, we think about our favorite sibling, or our most loving parent or grandparent, or we think of what does how God sees us, and if we can view it from those different perspectives, that helps our perspective shift and change. And so when we really think through that and kind of write those things down, so that's something I'd encourage you to do is to think through those different perspectives and write it down of what they would say if you were to say, I'm not good enough, and that's one of your negative core beliefs, which is a major one, by the way, that most people actually have. Then we get those perspectives from all these different resources of people that we appreciate and love. And I just thought of another one that I would add into that is a spiritual leader or prophet or from their perspective, looking at it from their perspective and writing down what they have to say. If they were there in person and you asked them that question, what would they say? Write those things down and then create your own kind of affirmation about that negative core belief. And then every time you had that negative core belief of like, I'm not good enough, you could look at that affirmation of what a summary of all those people and beings said about you, and that will help you.
That's so good. And it's something that you can make these changes so easily. They're easy changes. It's not, it might take a little bit of time, but a lot of times people think in order for me to be in a better place, I'm going to have to make some painful changes. And that's not the case. Going to a therapist might seem painful to them because they're going to be told that they're doing it wrong, or let's fix this or change this. But therapists are actually there to help support you where you are at and help you. So here's my question. I have a question. I wonder, I'm just guessing that these things can help anyone in any kind of trauma. Is that correct? I think there might be other things, more intense treatment that you would have to have or take more time. But bottom line is it possible for someone who's had severe trauma to work through that with changing our thoughts? I don't know.
Certainly it is. it can help anybody and everybody, but yeah, even severe trauma, they might need additional help and guidance in accessing and resolving trauma from the past so that these have an effect, because usually the trauma is what's keeping them stuck or unable to proceed forward or even believe the actual affirmations that they're working on. And sometimes that's not enough, just having the affirmations or even working through the workbook. They need a little bit more help, and that's where a therapist can come in to really assist them and resolve that trauma and help them with that, with either EMDR or other types of therapy.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up EMDR. That was my next question. If you could explain to someone who's never heard of EMDR, what it is, maybe how it works, if you were to just tell a client that's never heard of it and you were trying to sell it to them, how would you explain it?
All right. So EMDR is an acronym that stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And so a lot of research has been done with EMDR. It's the only alternative. It's considered an alternative therapy because it's not one traditional, and but it's the only one that's accepted by the American Psychological Association because of the extensive research that's been done on it, and also because it's been very effective in helping people with PTSD as well as trauma, and so it's often used or recommended for veterans as well as those who've had trauma or severe anxiety disorders. So what it actually is, and actually how it actually works, is if you can think of the old time movies where hypnosis was used, and they would use a timepiece and they would move it on a thing, and you are getting sleepy, and it to help you understand that actual movement, the eye movement back and forth, we call bilateral stimulation, and that movement actually shifts us from anxiety down to a lower range, which is called alpha theta, and where we can access the unconscious mind, and where we're more calm and able to resolve trauma that has happened in the past without being fearful or anxious about it. And by doing that and talking about it in that way, then allows them to overcome that trauma or roadblock. And so what is actually happening there is that bilateral stimulation, whether it's using the eye movements or I call them tappers, the little buzzers that alternate in the hand. But by doing that, so you would do that, the actual session would be, you think about that trauma from a safe place and from some distance, and while you're using those tappers or eye movements, and then that goes on for about 30 to 40 rounds, and then you'll, over time, your thoughts will become better, more light, more bright, more hopeful, and the way you look at the trauma or the anxiety producing stimulus will actually become less, and so that's how it actually works. That's kind of it in a nutshell, and I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and I can kind of add to that it's, from my experience from it, it was going back into this memory. I was able, for some reason, we have these situations that happen and we make assessments, like we've mentioned, that might not be true, but it is what has caused the trauma, which causes the triggering. So something comes up and it reminds us of that situation. So going back into that memory And it's just kind of like it's stuck inside of us. So if you were to, like, some people say, I want to rewind and do that all over again, it's a redo. You can go back in time in your memory of that circumstance, and you can reprogram the conclusion of what happened. So that's, I don't know if that's what you were saying, if that adds to make any more clarification, but that might be kind of what it is. It's just it's like a redo. You go back and you make a few changes. I want to check really quick on, you have to go in a couple minutes. Max has an appointment, but I wonder if we don't have any comments. But if anyone, I don't even know if anyone can hear me. So if anyone has any comments or questions before we end, feel free to throw it out there. I have, let's see, pull you back on here. Just a couple more minutes. So is there anything else, Max, that you want to say to our audience? I've mentioned maybe briefly to Max that the audience are single adults, ages 40 to 65-ish. And we're working through self-image for sure. That's the most important, I believe, is the very first piece of rediscovering ourselves. For me, it was just discovering myself for the first time. Really, I didn't realize that all of my life I was really stuck in these mindsets that were not healthy or not helpful, I should say. And so I think there are a lot of people that are kind of experiencing this kind of stuff too. Is there as well, and something you might know from what you would tell a client, or if each individual was your client, what kind of words of encouragement would you offer?
Yeah, I think that if you're getting stuck, that get extra help and professional help if you need it. I think it'd be the first thing that I would want to say and encourage you to do so, because if you're doing the same thing over and over again, and you've heard that adage that if it's not working, doing it over and over again, then maybe you need some additional help or professional help. So besides that, I encourage everyone to work on these things, to really put a lot of heart and soul into it, and you'll be able to see a difference, because it affects all of our life. Our self-image does affect how we interact with other people in our relationships, in our work environment, and our happiness. And we really truly can find joy when we feel better about ourselves. So the biggest thing that I often say along these same lines is that when we have things that happen to us in our daily lives, like they will affect our emotions. And so your emotions might be going up and down like that, when you're things that are positive, well, they're up. And then when somebody says something to you, then you're really, really down, or something bad happens and your self-image goes down to the toilet. Well, what we want to do is it should look more like this, right? When you have a good self-image, then this is what happens. The severities and the ends of these aren't as big. You don't go down to depression. You just think, oh, that was sad that happened, rather than being depressed. Or when something, you can still have joy. I don't think it tops it out or makes your joy less, but it does make the bad things that happen not as severe. So that's what I remind people of.
Thank you. No, that's good. That's very helpful, because there are, I love that. It's validation for sure that when you start to feel like you're healing, it's when you can feel peace in the middle of anything else that's going on around you. You can still feel that inner peace. Thank you so much for coming on and your time. If anyone has any questions, they can either personal message me, or they can add a message to the video, and I will reach out to you if I don't know the answers. So anyway, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hey, Max.
Yeah.